positioning and is the main thing. What to do with your army, positioning, as well as doing continuous macro and kind of just looking at your hotkeys and going, how can we maybe make that a bit easier for you?
Yeah, so I'll just say, in these games, it's before I kind of changed my strategy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I so in these games I try to go double gas, kind of. I think you're watching the other guy, but yeah. So I tried to go double gas
Restart the
into
stream.
like early.
Make sure you refresh the stream because I was only watching him for like 2 seconds at the very start of the game, so your stream might have buffered a bunch or something if you're still that far behind.
My internet is not great where I am.
Make sure you put it on like 480p then or something like that. You'll still be able to see all the details you need on 480p, but that way it should make it sure it's not buffering and that sort of stuff. Because 1080p 60 FPS is, yeah. If like I was watching, yeah, yep.
Yeah, so in these games I try to go to like early 5 units, like 3 Reaper to Hellion, and I guess a big question that I like recently over the last week I kind of switched back to just doing a Reaper expand and scouting, because I found that when I open with units, so I had 2 problems. One, I didn't really know what to do with my units. Like I didn't know when it was safe for me to move out. Kind of felt like a gamble, because I can move out and then end up with like the same 5 units in my base that took a different route.
Yeah.
And then I get screwed because I found that if I do like a Reaper expand, and then it's up to like my enemy to do damage, or they're behind, which is kind of a better. I don't know if it's really better because I see all the pros kind of do the early like units, but that's how it feels to me. So, but in these games, like I tried, so it's like a hero marine, like early 5 units into the expansion. But I found that I'm behind a lot in the beginning because I don't really know what to do with my units.
When you have been expanding, have you been doing gas first or just barracks then the gas?
No, never gas first. It's like
and you've been SCV scouting with that, I imagine.
So if I go 2 gas like I did in this game, then I don't scout.
Yeah, but on the expand version, what time do you scout?
On the expand, I always scout. Yeah.
What time is like just after your barrack starts? Is it, or does it just get there later?
Yeah, it's like the first SCV after my rack start.
Okay, so it's probably about a 16, 17, something like that. No worries. Awesome. That's cool. Okay, so with that style, some of the weaknesses is you're more open to aggression, right? Certain things can slow you down and mess you up. In terms of like, if they come across on a smaller or medium-sized map with their first Reapers and Hellions, you can't really defend your natural. So it can delay like the gas going down in your natural or pick off an SCV or 2, that sort of stuff. Do you get a bunker with that build, or do you just try to kind of
get a bunker? Yeah.
You do? Okay.
So I would say that that build is probably less optimized than my Hero Marine one, just because I'm trying to be like more adjustable to whatever they do. But my general idea that I'm trying to go to is to go to Cyclone as quickly as possible, because then I'm safe against that early aggression, because it kills like the Reaper and Hellion pretty easy, and then I can use it to defend drops, and I get like Viking as my first starport unit, and right after the Cyclone I get a tank.
Do you have a timing for when you build the bunker? So obviously you'd only build the bunker if they're double gas, right? Like if you see they've also done a fast expand, you probably skip the bunker.
Yes.
And when
I don't know, I don't really. Because I find that the bunker is also good at kind of, if they push with tanks, then it delays things enough for me to get tanks.
Yeah, it's very useful against fast tank pushers for sure, especially the far out front it is. It can buy you a lot of time and space in messy situations. So that can be powerful for sure. Okay, so with the expanding version, we get a bunker, etc., and we're going fast Cyclone. Now, just out of curiosity, so are you going Reaper, Marine, straight into Reactor, and then your factory is building its own tech lab for the Cyclone, or do you build the tech lab on the barracks and like swap the factory onto it?
So it depends on what I scout. If I scout they are going for like Reaper Hellion of any kind, I usually get a Hellion first, and then I go into like tech lab. But yeah, I don't really switch.
Okay,
like
so you just
normally.
get a Hellion to add to the Reaper, the Marine, plus then there's 2 Marines building at a time off your reactor. So that's like going to defend
Yeah,
2 Reaper Hellion. But then if there's like a third Reaper, a second Hellion, there's like maybe a moment where you're kind of outnumbered, but then the Cyclone comes out. Okay.
right.
So I find with this, most of the time, this works perfectly. What you've just described, it really does work great. It's fantastic, especially in very defensive meta. There are windows where if they're just aggressive enough with their first 2 Reapers, then the Hellion and stuff, like, and they manage to pick off a Reaper, things can spiral out of control pretty bad, especially if our bunker's not on time. But I think one of the best things we can always do in StarCraft is we don't need to be 100% safe versus everything. So we can, if people can start getting really good with their aggression, we might need to revisit it and say, man, this expand build doesn't feel that good. But for now, we can absolutely stick with it if it feels good. However, we should give you the theory knowledge. You were kind of like, man, it just feels like really bad with, like, you know, the three, say 2 Reaper and a Hellion, or the 5 early units, the 3 Reaper, 2 Hellion. Not sure what to do with those units. So definitely there's an art form to it. So I, at the moment, will always go 2 Reaper Hellion. And that's my standard. And I always look to see if I can do something with it. And I am always mentally prepared for them to run in with 2 Reapers and a Hellion at the same time as I go in, because often you miss each other on the map. You go down different paths without realizing it. And then, like you said, well, then they're in your base, you're in their base. But I actually calculate to try and be ahead in that situation. And the way I do that, so let's talk about that. We'll add some sub points here. I'm writing all this down, of course. A big thank you, by the way, Zictator, for the sub. Thank you very much, mate. Appreciate that. So with 3 Reaper 2 Hellion, so I guess I'll just write that Pigs 2 Reaper 1 Hellion setup. So with that one, what I do is immediate tech lab after Hellion into Cyclone, and that Cyclone should queue just before my Hellion Reaper dives in. But also, so the idea there is if they run in at exactly the same time, usually they're a few seconds later because I'm like straight across the map, Cyclone's going to be out after about another 20 seconds, 25 seconds. So they've only got limited time in my base. The other more important thing is depots raised. So Hellions can't get in. Because Reapers can do good damage to your workers, but if there's a Hellion, it can just kill them, right? Like, where you can kind of surround Reapers and force them to like stutter step and micro and stuff, which is very hard for them to do if they're microing at home. But if there's a Hellion, well, we've all seen what happens when we attack SCVs at a Hellion, right? Like, oh my God, the splash damage is disgusting, right? So having your depot raise is basically you saying, hey, when I go across with this second Reaper in this Hellion, which, by the way, in this game, your second Reaper is super duper late, right? Your Hellion's already out. We should already be, you know, heading over there. But if those were already rallying across the map, we raise this. We say, look, maybe he runs in and delays my command center on the natural. Just comes in, kills that SCV. But the Hellion can't get past my wall. If he jumps in with the Reapers, then he's got to then micro them into the mineral line and then watch them while I'm in his base at the same time. So that's like you're saying I am going to embrace that chaotic situation and actually get ahead in that chaotic situation, if that makes sense. So that's a really powerful thing to do. Depot raised, immediately go for the Cyclone, have that all planned out and mapped out. To make sure that works, right? And it's all about every single second matters. And if we did poke in, you always attack the front with the 2 Reaper Hellion, right? So why do I do it that way? And this is important because I want you to understand how I've planned this, because I want it to have a very strict plan, right? Because the problem is when we get unsure about what we're doing with our units, that's where we get really like, what am I doing? But 2 Reapers in the Hellion, we can fast forward to this replay. You come very late, but should always poke the front. Now, if we see a bunker, obviously we just run away, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, if there's only 1 Marine in that bunker and you can tell because it's doing no damage, you very well could just run past into the mineral line and just go after any mules and SCVs on the natural. So you start to program all these little things. Run away. Unless it's doing no damage. If only 1 Marine DPS, run past and go after SCVs and mules, then run away past bunker again. Because bunker just does so little damage. 1 Marine does almost nothing. So there's a very big difference between this bunker with 3 or 4 Marines in it and one with just 1 Marine or 1 Reaper in it. So the other thing there is basically we run in, and the idea is, you know, I'm not even going to call it poke the front. I'm going to say attack their natural and spread units before going in. Reaper, Reaper's slightly in front, so they tank. Because ideally, you pull back your Reapers and regen, right? Whereas if your Hellion goes in and that sort of thing, it's not good. And then you always want to do, always drop grenade, drop one grenade immediately. And that's usually how you win that fight. If they have 2 Reapers and a Hellion on top of the ramp, you have 2 Reapers and a Hellion. Reaper, Hellion, Reaper. So the Reapers are just slightly in front of the Hellion, spread out. You attack move, they're sitting there. You're usually going to be the first one to throw the grenade, unless they happen to have their screen watching the front at that exact moment. So if you throw the first grenade, they lose attacking time as their units are bouncing. You also can focus fire. You can be like, kill the Reaper, kill the Reaper, kill the Hellion or something like that. Focus fire if helpful. Pull back weak units if useful. So this is all the kind of fancy things you can do with a 2 Reaper Hellion pressure. Now, what if there's nothing there, right? We've talked about, okay, if there's a bunker, run away, right? Potentially. No units. We need to dive in, right? Because they're probably about to jump into our base as well. Or maybe there's not even a command center. In which case, we want to at least just run to the ramp and just see what they're building. Oh, there's a tank just popped out and there's a bunch of Marines. It's a tank push, or oh, there's a command center on the high ground just behind the wall. Basically, we just want to see what's going on. And if they're going to run in our base, well, we want to be the one who runs into their base first. And if our 2 Reapers and Hellions run up before they raise the depot, get in the mineral line, we're going to kill every SCV, while they're only going to kill a few of our SCVs before our Cyclone pops out.
Is there any, like, I'm trying to understand why, like, a lot of games that I'm watching, they go for the 5 units and not the 3 units. Because I'm thinking, but if you get 5 units, they have so much time to get the Cyclone up. It just, like, nullifies everything you're doing.
Yeah, so it's all about escalating that fighting. So if I go in with 2 Reapers and a Hellion, and they've just got a 3rd Reaper and a 2nd Hellion, they can kind of hunt me down a little bit, right? So if I, like, commit to that pressure, run up the ramp, their other units have just arrived, and then they friggin' kill all of my units, or only my Hellion gets away or something like that, then they can counterattack. So it's really good for that. Now, there's also a few 1-base openings where, so why would you want those extra units? Well, okay, so it keeps you super safe, right? Number one, but it also allows you to pressure a really greedy player. So if someone's gone for a fast expand build, like the one you just mentioned with the Cyclone, that Cyclone simply is not ready in time. Usually, if you're really tight with a 3 Reaper 2 Hellion pressure, I'm pretty sure you could always get in, deny the natural for ages, and just like smash into the base even. Potentially the defensive player gets the wall off up, but they're already going to lose a few SCVs and have their whole opening kind of messed up before that. It's also going to give you a few more units to help keep you safe against if someone goes like reactor first mass Reaper Hellion medevac. Do you know that build where it's 6 Reapers, 3 Hellions, and a medevac jumps into the main base at like 340? I don't know the exact time. It's very early.
So I had one guy who did that to me, and I went for the 5 units into Cyclone, but he did that, and he had like a proxy starport with a Liberator, and it just destroyed me. I was out of the game within like, but it only happened once, so that's one of those things that I'm like, I don't know if I need to.
Yeah, well, what you'd probably find as well is if you looked at that replay, that there's just like, you know, little things where you're like, oh, you know what, like this guy never expanded, right? So if you didn't see that with an expand build, because you were doing an expand build that game, right?
Right.
So you probably
expand build every game.
You probably didn't know if he'd expanded or not, right? Because you scout with your SCV, you see he's gone double gas, but you don't know if he's gone for a different build order or not. You don't know if he's staying on 3 workers on each gas the whole time in this early stage or pulling off for the quick command center. So something I actually like to do in this scenario with an expand build, your SCV scout, and you'll see pros do this depending on the meta, verse 2 gas, hide SCV behind natural to check if it's down at 2 minutes 30. Or we could say 2:35, since, you know, people make mistakes, not always pro gamer timings. So if it's not down at 2:35, not down equals 3 on each gas equals, you know, extra safety precautions, right? It's just, you know, basically like be more prepared. Because there could be, what could there be? Proxy Banshee, proxy BC, you know, one base tank Viking push. Basically, anything you could think of could be happening, right? It's that 6 Reaper plus 3 Hellion YOLO into the main. All sorts of one base openings, right? Essentially, it might be like, okay, there's lots of different options. For me, with an expand build, I would go a single Viking before Raven. Because I'm like, well, I need my Cyclone to help defend the front of my base. So therefore, because of that, I'll need a Viking in the main in case the Liberator comes in. And that'll also help with like a medevac drop if they do like a Cyclone or Marine tank drop. A Viking is just like a really sick unit because it's kind of very well rounded in those early trades. Whereas, you know, a Raven, not very useful against a one base build, right? Drop one auto turret, and sometimes it's not the most useful thing in the world.
I find that like, so recently, like in the past weeks that I played a ton, I haven't been really going for Raven at all because I think, and I understand that it's an amazing unit, has a lot of utility, but I find that in my MMR, most people that go like Ravens just lose them, and then they don't get used a lot. And if I just have a bunch of like Vikings instead, then I'm much more like safe against a tank push.
Absolutely, dude. No, for sure. Vikings are way easier to use, and it just gives you control of the skies. Like, if you initiate a fight and they're not fully ready for it, Vikings, like one Raven's dead before they even notice what's happening. The next one maybe gets one auto turret down and it's dead as well. And you're like, oh, sick. Now I have I have air control. I don't even need 6 Vikings here. So maybe I split 2 of them off, one to go land in each mineral line. A landed Viking in a mineral line is very powerful harassment as well. If you've got extra Vikings, like they can land on tanks. They could shoot down medevacs, Ravens. Yeah, that's a totally valid way of playing. I personally like to play one Raven into that because of the same sort of thing where I'm like, Vikings gives me air control, you know? Going Ravens, if you can force a big fight where you spam the auto turrets, you got a few more units, it can be really nice. But I also find it just a little bit dicey to use. They're a great harassment unit as well. But yeah, the Vikings just give me more of a like, hey, I can win a frontal fight. I can take position and that sort of thing. So that's a totally valid way of playing. If you skip Ravens completely, you're very open to Banshees. Now, Banshees are very uncommon in the meta for a long time because everyone builds Ravens. So that's why it's like, it's not a bad gamble to completely skip Raven. If you go single Raven though, you know, that's an okay way of doing it because it keeps you safe there without overcommitting to them. You still get a bunch of auto turrets without going absolutely crazy. Whereas if you go like triple Raven, you really are going to be looking for a big fight with 3 or 4 tanks, a lot of Marines that you've built, and you just want to like go and see if you can start a fight where you just drop like 10 auto turrets on them. And if you, even if they've got 2 or 3 Ravens, if you throw your auto turrets faster by 2 seconds, you crush the fight super one-sidedly.
So when you do the 2 Reaper, one Hellion, do you scout?
I do not. So for me, I don't even send my Reaper across. So my first scout is my 2 Reaper into the Hellion pressure. Yeah.
So question, I had one game that the guy just did a 1 base like tank push.
Mm-hmm.
And I went for like this build, and I felt like I had no chance because I had like Reaper Hellion. He brings like Viking tank Marine, right? And my Cyclone is gonna be late. My tank is gonna be super late. Like I had like 1 Raven and he had Vikings. Like I just felt like I had no chance, and I don't have any scouts, right?
Yeah. So if your 2 Reaper Hellion scouts should see what's happening. So the thing is, if you go 2 Reaper Hellion and you just sit at home, or you wait for 3 Reapers 2 Hellions, it definitely gives you a much bigger delay before you have any information on what's going on, right? This is why I like to scout immediately with that 2 Reaper 1 Hellion, because if I go in then and see no command center, I'm like, okay, shit, all right, like let's add a bunker, let's get that Viking before the Raven. I'm gonna do those things. But what you're gonna find mostly, if we had that, do we have that replay handy by any chance of that tank push?
No, not handy.
No worries.
Too many games.
there's a very high likelihood there is downtime on your buildings as well. So one of the big things that happens, unless he built his factory and starport like in your third base and then just like met up with his marines outside your base or something, there's a big chance that you've missed production on your factory, right? So one of the big things is whenever the skirmish starts and the fighting starts, people are late on that. This is why, like I mentioned, like with my 2 Reaper Hellion, notice how I mapped out every tiny detail where I was like, I need to have that tech lab started as soon as the Hellion pops. I need to then start the Cyclone as soon as that tech lab finishes before I run in with my Reaper Hellion. So whenever I select my Reaper Hellion to go in for the attack on the front, I actually select my factory and build Cyclone as I'm running up the ramp or like just before I go in. That's like programmed in, because if that Cyclone's late 10, 15 seconds because I'm busy microing, it could screw me over in too many scenarios. It just made things, a single Reaper jumps in, there's nothing to defend. The Cyclone's not out early enough to defend a tank counter attack or a medevac drop. You know, having the Cyclone out, then straight into siege tanks if you need them, or swapping over for the Ravens, that's so important. So having non-stop factory build time is a really huge thing. So looking at your build here, your factory's quite late. Let's take a little look at your opening. So if we were to do a 2 Reaper Hellion opening, I'm a big fan of the gas first, because that makes sure we can get the factory down really quick. We want to get 2 Reapers and then a Hellion out and join them up as quickly as possible. You can do it with a barracks gas. Means your first Reaper's slightly faster, but you really need to get a second gas faster. You got yours at 1 minute and 2 seconds. You want to get that second gas at like probably 55 or something, maybe earlier, because every bit of gas is needed to get that factory down. The whole point is we want to get 2 Reapers and a Hellion out as quickly as possible, right? We need to be able to pressure our opponent and also defend ourselves, because if you're getting proxy reapered, you're not SCV scouting with this build. Having the factory up quick enough to get a Hellion out, that's one of the big things that helps you defend a 2 or 3 Rex Reaper, right? So every second matters there. So let's take a look. So I think, yeah, right here with 75 minerals should be right on 55 seconds. Yeah, just there. We should be like, bam, take a gas. So make sure that second gas goes down a lot quicker if we're doing this build. So adjustments, second gas immediately on 55 seconds. So let's look if that factory goes down immediately on, so we got guys on gas straight away, which is good. But does that factory go down as soon as we get 100 gas? And a good marker is if you're doing one of these one base openings, you want that factory down by 1 minute 40 is a good way of looking at it. Now, because you're not going gas first, yours would probably be like 142, 143 a lot of times, I think. Because we'd get that gas like a few seconds faster, right? Yeah. So it would maybe be like 142, 143. We'd shave like 6 seconds, 5 seconds off to this factory. It's not the craziest thing in the world, but it does make a difference. And notice if we don't do this, or we don't do a gas first, depending on which one you want to do, it's either second gas immediately on 5 seconds, or gas first build, one or the other. Make sure that factory is faster. Your second Reaper is going to pop out around the time your Hellion's just starting. So unless you're planning to use these Reapers aggressively themselves, go straight across the map with your first Reaper for a scout or something like that, I don't really see the point in going barracks before factory. What do you think? Sorry, barracks before gas.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, I don't really like when you build gas first. There's like the 3-second delay, right, until you build your barracks. Drives me crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you think it's better, I'm willing to try it. Given
so what situation does that 3 second? What does that hurt you for though? The 3 second delay.
It feels like I'm missing like. I don't really know the answer to that, but it's probably not. But aren't you like an SCV behind because of it?
No, you're like maybe you're a few seconds of build time because you're waiting for the barracks to finish before you make the orbital. So there's like 4 seconds of SCV build time you miss. It's not a big deal. It does matter. Don't get me wrong, but you get faster tech. So it actually, like I said, it keeps you safer, like much safer against the 2 or 3 racks Reaper, because the factory and the Hellion comes out a lot faster. And it just opens up then your starport tech and everything else. So then your cyclones are coming out faster. All those next steps in terms of the tech are much quicker. That's why same thing with an expand build. More often with expand builds, we will see gas first expand. So you can get the factory up really quickly, build a Hellion or 2 for defense. So that's something where the barracks gas, I have been fan of the barracks gas expand at points in time because it's just worked well and people haven't punished it. But something to be aware of is when people are very tight with their aggression, it feels like gas first expand is stronger because of the faster factory, right? And because you're just getting, you know, that Hellion out earlier and that sort of stuff. A lot of people will go like Reaper straight into Reactor with the factory, like factory and Reactor with the gas first. And so they can just get the double marine production going and then the Hellion and stuff. There's a weak spot with that as well because you've only got one Reaper for a little bit. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, there's a few different ways to do it. To be honest, I haven't been screwing with the expand builds because I just find the 2 gas is so reliable. Because if someone's being really greedy, I can punish them. And if someone's being overly aggressive, I can defend it really nicely. Like, even if, you know, we were talking about 3 Reaper, 2 Hellion. Remember, I mapped that all out. I didn't even finish, right? I wrote out a lot of notes. I didn't write out all of it by any means. If I go with my 2 Reaper Hellion poke, and they have 3 Reaper 2 Hellion, and they kill one of my Reapers, I very quickly pull back. The Hellion runs home because it can outrun their units. But if I can get 1 Reaper to the left and just run off to the side of the map, whenever I'm outnumbered in the early game, if you can keep a Reaper alive on the edge of the map and then click that into their base, that is beautiful. So if you know, okay, I'm going for Cyclone, I've only got 2 Reapers Hellions, they've got 3 Reapers, 2 Hellions, or they're going for non-stop Reaper Hellion production, anytime where that's happening, where you can click a Reaper into their base and start killing SCVs as they're coming across the map, you will scout exactly what the add-ons are on their buildings to see if there's like Banshees or anything, or if it's just Raven production. But you'll also start damaging SCVs. You can often pull them home. There's a lot of like details like that where I often have kept myself alive with Reaper movement and bought time for an extra Cyclone or a tank to get out or the bunker to finish or this or that. So there's like there's tons of little details. What's important for now is probably focusing on exactly which build we want to do and which line. We've talked about tons of different details, but do you want to stick with the expanding line or with the double gas line?
Difficult to say. I'll probably try what you said, like the 2 Reaper, 1 Hellion. If you want to just give me more pointers on that. Like, do you take you take like 1 gas before the racks and then a second gas right after whenever you have money?
Sorry, can you say that again?
You take 1 gas before racks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then second gas, do you take it right after, like when you have money?
Yeah.
Yeah,
as long as it doesn't cut into SCV production. So it should be pretty similarly timed to what we did in this particular replay with the second gas timing. Probably like 57 seconds, maybe something like that.
Okay, and you get like 2 Reapers in a row without an add-on, and then you do reactor on your barracks. Do you switch at any time? Like,
so in terms of that opening, okay, let's 2 Reaper Hellion. For me, I mean, I like to go just 1 Raven into Vikings. So, you know, a very standard thing is to swap the starport onto the barracks as reactor like you did in this game. So yeah. I do that every game. Once it's time to go into Viking production, I do it after 1 Raven. But that's the only point where it would swap. So basically, yeah, it's just, I mean, gas, barracks, gas, factory, plus pull 1 worker off each gas. 1 off each gas. Factory SCV builds natural. So this is very similar to what you're doing here. Just the factory's a little bit quicker. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's just put this at this point of the replay so we can see that while we type. So factory SCV builds natural. Obviously, build a second depot nice and early as well. Yep, second depot.
And then third gas when the expansion finishes.
Because your command center is fast, you could build it before. Ideally, it finishes as the command center finishes, but sometimes it's a little later because you're busy doing other things. So you go 2 Reaper Hellion, right? And then it's straight into Reactor plus Tech Lab and Marines plus Cyclones. I know I'm kind of writing a messy little build order here, but you get it. Obviously, it's very important to build that depot on time to make sure you can build the Cyclone. I don't know exactly how to memorize that timing because it'll be different to what we see in this replay, but that depot will go down, and then kind of around that time, it's also going to be like, I'd say reactor plus tech lab plus back on gas can go around the same time, where you put the third worker back on each gas. That's probably a good moment.
That's important. Do you take 3 off gas or 2 off gas?
I only take 2 off. I think it's just simpler, nice and easy for me. A lot of pros will do 3 off gas. Up to you, whatever you prefer. I like to have a little bit of extra gas in the bank. Gives me a little bit more flexibility. Say if my natural gas gets denied for a little bit or this or that. But pros almost all do 3 off gas. I just do 2. Up to you. So you're gonna do 2
bring them back at full saturation of minerals. That's what I do here.
You could do it that way. I've written when you start your reactor in tech lab, we put back on gas to make sure we have plenty of it. But it's going to be up to you what blends with your build order a little bit. So we'll see exactly what works there. So third gas at CC 75% complete. That's one way of looking at it. So basically you just look at your command center. Oh, it's 3/4 of the way done. Drop the gas, and you can time that out as well. Yeah, that's my build order. When's the starport go down, I guess, right? That's going to be a thing. So usually starport will go down. Starport plus cyclone, and that should be just before you attack with 2 Reaper Hellion. So the idea is, the starport could start a little before that, but it's just important to make sure that it started before we go in, and so is the cyclone started. Because obviously the starport doesn't start straight away, and some people like to delay it even longer. But yeah, and then normally what people would do from there is they would swap starport onto tech lab for Raven. Factory swaps off and builds new tech lab for tanks after cyclone, and then basically you just go starport swaps with racks after 1 Raven for Viking and stim production. That's the build. And I mean, I like to do a nice air superiority push, so that sort of build, you know, 2 tanks and 2 to 4 Vikings plus Raven and early units equals a nice air superiorities push. And that's often a game winner in many of my games, because I just try to siege up here, and if you get in range of the starport or the factory or whatever, depending on the map, you can be really nice. Sometimes it's you siege down here, this sort of equivalent position, and you just deny a gas on the natural, pick off a bunker, contain them for a little bit. But the idea is just to hopefully you can pick off their ravens, right? Because you're the one initiating the fight. You've got the air advantage, and you could do lots of cool things with that.
Okay, just I guess before we go into like replays and positioning and all that,
Yep.
what do you do against, like, because I hate mech, honestly. I don't like it at all. I think it makes for very boring games.
Yep.
So what do you go for, like, as bio versus mech? I tried to go like Mess Marauder, doesn't really work. Mess Raven is like too finicky and like it dies.
You're going a little too specific there. So bio does work. Mass Raven, get the fuck out of here. That's ridiculous. Don't do that. Air control can be good, but basically, look, there's 2 ways. So I would put it in 2 steps, and technically you could skip the first step and go straight to the second one. So there's two phases of bio versus mech. The first one is mass expand and just get ridiculous amounts of bio. Now, it's still nice to have 2 factories building tanks, because they can still be very useful. Having a good tank count versus mech, it can be very useful, don't get me wrong. But basically, second factory is nice, but I want at least 8 barracks. Once I have like 8 command centers, right? Maybe I have 5 bases plus a few extra orbitals. I'll go up to 11 or 12 racks, right? And the idea is just basically for me, it's just non-stop bio plus medevac production, keeping units, keeping army in, you know, basically, technically, diving drops and finding openings And denying bases is great. Like, if you can find damage, that's an art form. But it's often like, oh, there's turrets in the edge of the main base, and that's fine. You see the Viking Raven here, so you scan ahead or whatever. Okay, Viking Raven's on that side. Okay, we're going to go this side, into the back of the natural. There's 2-3 turrets there. I'll lose a medevac, but who cares? We'll go in with 4 medevacs. And you boost in the back, unload behind the natural, unload up in the main base, and you just start killing shit. And your bio's expendable because you're out expanding your opponent. So that's the important thing, right? You're going up to a solid 80 plus SCVs. And you've got that crazy barracks count. So anytime you can trade, right, without just headbutting into tanks, you're good. So it's just like you're just queuing drops in. They come back to deal with that. The other half of your army that's up here just stims in on this base. And you know what you do? Often when you pull them out of position, you load up 2 of your medevacs with your main army, and then you send them boosted ahead, unloading on top of the siege tanks. But also, even if your bio's running in, even if you just unload while the medevacs are leading, you know, they drop the units kind of spread out in front, so they're naturally dragging the splash damage away from the big clump of units just behind them. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah, so it's like 2 medevacs are going forward, going drop a marine, 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 drop a marine. You know, and hopefully some are on top of the tanks. But yeah.
But what's your end plan? I guess to go like for air superiority, like Vikings.
You should be able to win if you do this well enough. You should be able to beat almost every single mech player with this. So keep that in mind. There is a crazy amount of refinement you can do at this stage. The problem most people have against late game is this stage here is how you can out expand and then just drag them down and just kill them. You can just beat them to death. So do not underestimate how powerful this is. 90% of players I have who play against mech, they go, I just can't beat them. And what you need to do is more scans to figure out what, like once you get up enough bases, more scans to figure out where the weak spots are and just get more fluid at movement and do more of these set plays. So these need to be set plays that are built into your head. Like I just said, okay, I'm going to figure out where the Vikings are, boost in the other side with half my army, and then come in the other side with half my army plus leading drops. That is a set play. If you haven't thought about it and you've gone, it's too hard to break mech, you will never be able to pull those moves off and mech will feel unbeatable. So just keep that in mind. Now, this is, like I said, phase 1. This is the first phase. It's just mass bio, medevacs dropping. You can kind of just skip this phase and go straight to phase 2 if you want to. But that is sort of engaging in a mech versus mech battle. It slows things down a little bit. It's still a very technical thing and still can work. But phase 2 is air control. So just remember, it's really important to really tunnel vision on getting good at one thing first before you move on to the next. If you're doing these 2 phases, but then you're not getting good at attacking, there's no point making 12 barracks bio and medevacs because you're not planning to use them. So if you were planning to skip the first phase, we would only build a few medevacs in the first place. We would keep our bio more as threatening squads, where if he just floats a command center out with no defense, sure, we can stim in and kill it. But we're not going to be actually looking to break. Why? We don't even have medevacs. We can't even drop. We're going straight to phase 2, air control. So what would that be? That would be go up to 3 starports with reactors, second armory, because we want double air upgrades, double air ups, fusion core for lib range. And then you just want to take Viking lib control. Viking control into libs. Harass, they're amazing for harassment. If they don't have turrets covering everything, which they won't, just 1 or 2 libs constantly snaking off and sieging up a mineral line are really good. But obviously for frontal pushing is the main thing. So basically your army at this point is basically mech. It's tanks plus Vikings plus libs. Now you'll have some bio left over, but it's not a big focus. So if you want to go straight to this stage, you can actually skip bio upgrades and just use all your gas to rush to this stage, right? So you could do something like, armor upgrades aren't even important for Marines against mech. Who cares? I'm only getting attack upgrades. I'm not even using my second engineering bay that I built earlier in the game. So you can be like, you know what? I'm only on 3 barracks. I'm actually going to go straight to 2 more starports and just take gases on my 3rd immediately to try and support that, right? So you can go straight to air control and try to take them on that way. If they go Thors or Cyclones, you just need to have enough libs and siege them properly, and you could do really well. Technically, Thors can outrange libs now, I believe, right? Or maybe not. I think it's about the same range. Do you know? Maybe chat knows.
I thought it's the same, but
probably the
So that's
same.
an interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. An interesting point. So when you say go straight to it, when like the second you understand they go mech, you
Yeah,
just switch everything.
yeah. I mean, mech can't attack you. Just either way, right? That like any mech push before they're like almost max is pretty weak because you can always just attack it from two sides with bio. And mech is really fucking weak if you just spread your bio out and attack from two sides. Like that's just how tank pushes work. Think about anytime you try to push a Protoss, you think it's going great, and then zealots come in from two sides. Exact same scenario in TvT against a lot of bio. They can't really push. And you've got tanks as well, so they can't really push through you. So yeah, you can literally just go straight to it the moment you know it's mech. Obviously, you keep expanding and stuff. You want to keep building that economy, but that can be really powerful.
What if they go cyclone?
Like mass cyclone,
Yeah,
they're really bad.
to add to the tanks.
Yeah, but you got to build tanks no matter what. There's no point where you're not building tanks. That's always something that you're doing. But bio kicks the shit out of cyclones really hard. Once you have stim and shields and concussive, you will destroy them. You do want to go more tech labs than reactors against mech, of course. Like maybe 3 tech labs, 2 reactors, something like that, of course. But yeah, I mean, basically, anytime you stim on cyclones or you catch them with a drop from behind or something, they crumble. So cyclones are really good if you you float a command center out. You haven't quite moved your tanks and bio forward. They run in, lock on, kill it, run away. You let them do moves like that. Cyclones are really good for being sneaky fuckers. But if you start just roaming around the map, so if they're doing that a lot, you just grab a double drop of bio. And you just move it around the map. I say a double drop. Don't put them in the medevacs. It's just 2 medevacs, a pack of units, and just move them around the edge. And you'll catch 4 cyclones getting ready for a run by. You'll just kill them. You do that a few times. Super easy. Anytime it comes to a pitched battle, cyclones will disappear to both bio and tanks. Cyclones just do not do well versus bio. They're good for map control. They're good for picking off units when you're not watching. They're great for picking off units or buildings before you have stim. Whenever you're not watching your army, you kind of get a few units caught off. But anytime push comes to shove, 120 hit point cyclones just disappear like that. They're super expensive, very slow to rebuild, really, really bad unit. The reason they work better against mech and mech versus mech is because they're so mobile and mech is so slow. So they can constantly just run around the mech force and catch them whenever they're on siege and like pick off the rally and do all this sort of stuff.
Do you only use the tanks defensively?
Against cyclones or in general?
Against mech.
No, you can go push with them as well for sure. If you can get a good siege location, it's amazing. Yeah.
Okay, and you said like second factory is nice. So can you like when exactly?
When do you
go for
normally build a second factory?
Don't. I don't have like a timing for that.
That's one of the most important things in
guess
TvT.
If I feel like I need it.
Yeah, that should be a standard part of your TvT. Second factory. It's just that's like one of the most fundamental things in TvT in general. If you're playing biotank, so that should always be going down after like 5 barracks. That should be the first thing before you add more barracks. Technically, you can play more barracks before the second factory if you want to play a mass marine style. But if you're doing that, you should be going medevacs and you should be dropping. So we can look at this replay, for instance. You're up on like 1 billion barracks, 1 billion SCVs. I mean, that seems nice, but you're building Vikings. So there's a disconnect. Vikings are there to make tank pushes good. Marines are there to run around the back, do drops, stim in, kill a command center, stim on this base where there's only 2 tanks, catch them, kill some SCVs, run away. Marines are about mobility. They're about hand-to-hand combat, that sort of stuff. Whereas Tank Viking is more about a slow frontal push and control. So technically, I guess you could play 8 barracks or even just play off 1 factory all game long. It's not recommended, but you could do it if you're using drops and positioning enough with those Marines and medevacs. But that's a different style of Terran. So this is something where fundamentally, you've got to think of Terran biotank is either Viking tank frontal control oriented. That's like your Hero Marine style. Or it's Mass Marine medevac focused, which is more of like a Kelazur or some Kua does that sometimes, but even then he'll usually get a second factory pretty quick these days. And that's all about drops, map control, backstabs, surrounds, positioning. So those are two very different styles. Like the mass marines are much more about finding, you threaten enough on the map, they split their army up, and then you bring back your drops and you surround their push and you crush it. Or you're simply dropping in the back lines of their mineral lines all game and constantly attacking many different areas to catch them out of position. But those are very different kind of lines of how you want to play TvT.
So how do you push if you have only marines? Isn't it enough for them to have like a planetary and you can't really attack a position?
I mean, you could just get a few marines behind said planetary. So we just talked about attacking multiple angles. So look at this. No planetary, no planetary, no planetary on any of his first 3 bases. If he gets a planetary on the 4th, you could still kill the gases with marines. You could still get marines behind the mineral lines. You could still run in, kill the tanks, shift-click the SCVs, run away. If you have 60 marines, 50 marines, you're still going to kick the shit out of a planetary, especially if you spread out. But you've got 1,000 other angles you can attack with those marines as well. Back of the natural, back of the main, back of the third. When he's pushing you, he doesn't have a planetary with him. So marines are incredible versus everything. Anytime you're attacking into a planetary with tanks behind it, that's probably a bad idea. But they can't have a planetary and tanks everywhere. And the whole point of marines, it's like playing Mutiling Bane, right? When you're playing a Mutiling Bane player, if you've got Bio, Mines, and Thors all in your main, and you're like, please, Zerg, fly your pack of Mutalisks into my main. And then the Mutas look really bad if they do that, right? But they never do that. They attack everywhere else. So whenever you're playing one of these mobility compositions, it's not about, is this the best composition if we just smush our armies together? This is such a fast, mobile, and flexible composition that I can engineer fights where I have the upper hand. I can fight only part of his army where he doesn't want to fight, or where he's not looking, or where he's unsieged. And that's really the big goal when you're going for a Marine medevac style. It's dropping all over the place. It's mobility. It's finding weaknesses. It's not fighting into their strong positions.
So I guess if you want to be aggressive, right? How many tanks do you leave behind?
Against a mech player?
Look in this game right now, my entire army is in front of him. Right? I have nothing. I have 1 tank in my natural.
You don't need to leave tanks at home. Yeah, unless you're on the back foot and you don't have any map control, there's just no need to. Technically, if you really want to, you could leave a tank on your 3rd, tank on your 4th, something like that. But you just don't need to, because I think you've kind of taken massive damage maybe to some counterattacks at some points. The problem you have is you don't have any drop defense either. So you've got 1 turret there, you've got 1 turret there. Well, that turret there is not that important. It's more important to zone out these edges, right, with turrets. More turrets there or down on this edge. Maybe some spotting depots or marines along the edges of the map would be awesome. But in general, if you've got good map control and you're attacking a lot, you don't need to leave a lot of tanks at home. You only leave tanks at home when they're doing a really good job of wrestling map control off you and you don't really know where stuff is. So if we look at the last few minutes of this game, you can see we've let him have a lot of map control. So that does give us an issue where we go, oh, okay, well, technically in this scenario, if we didn't know where his army was, this is dangerous maybe, right? But if you've got a few more marines that you sent attack moving around the edges of the map to kind of clear things out, left a marine there, would have been pretty nice. I like this marine spotter you've got in the middle of the map. That is awesome. That's super sick, right? He's probably going to see a push, but technically we should probably have a marine over here as well. But we're going to come around and look for an opening and kind of see what we can do here. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about just leaving tanks at home by default unless you are choosing to play a very defensive style. If you're kind of just chilling, playing, I don't really attack a lot until I have 5 starport battle cruiser on 5 base. Okay, we'll just leave tanks everywhere, right? Because we're not really looking to make big plays. But if you're attacking well enough and producing consistently, you don't need to worry about that because your rally point is usually going to defend you against most things. Having some spotters out. Most people F2 a fair bit, which is why I really like the spotting depots because it's, a little bit more permanent. It's not going to get F2'd out of there. Some people love sensor towers. I'm not the biggest fan of sensor towers, but they definitely have their place. Whenever you've got extra gas, it's pretty cheap to get them a little bit later on in the game when you've got lots of extra gas. But I wouldn't stress about
They don't
that. Yeah.
take you a lot less time than you think they would. Like if my army is out of position and he walks into like a sensor tower, then I'm I'm probably not gonna set up in time.
Yeah. I would say sensor towers are best for when they're threatening and they're rotating between different angles. That's when a sensor tower is best, right? When they're like, I'm attacking your third. Wait, no, now I'm moving over to attack your fourth. If it comes to like spotting a doom drop, you're like, oh, cool, it's a doom drop. Like, yeah, I got an extra 6 seconds to pull my army home from the other side of the map. I absolutely agree with you. And this is, people like get really stupid with sensor towers. They're like, you don't have sensor towers. I think for most people, the way a sensor tower actually works for them is it makes their opponent too afraid to go through the sensor tower, assuming that they'll be ready for it. But it's not the most important thing. So anyway, don't get too afraid of counterattacks. I think what's more important is, because we're running out of time, we got to talk about how you actually use your army. Because as much as we've talked about, maybe we could be more confident with our opening, we need to choose a different line. Are we going tank Viking? If so, which it looks like you want to do in this game, you're trying to play a Hero Marine tank Viking style. Problem is we never got a second factory. So getting the second factory and then a second starport so that we maintain the tank and Viking control, those are the two most important things if you play this style. Notice you don't have medevacs. If you stim your Marines, they're not going to get healed. That's a totally valid choice. Your Marines are basically there just for when he tries to break your tank Viking, they'll stim forward.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had more tanks, more Vikings, that's cool. But you've got to use your army in a little bit of a better manner, right? So this is what is most important. Structurally, if we look at this game, you move out at this point just to finish criticizing the macro. Like we said, okay, instead of these barracks, second factory would be great. Other than that, looks pretty good. Would be nice if you had vehicle weapons going on your armory. Getting +2 vehicle weapons is really awesome. And then you can swap into air upgrades after that. You got a 4th command center. You have already more than enough SCVs. Too many, in fact, I would say, probably by a little bit. But not the end of the world.
I had one game that I got to like 110 SCVs, and I realized that I should probably start watching when to stop.
Yeah. Yep. Even going 80, unless you're getting a fast 4th, is like pretty damn high. 70 is already a pretty damn good number. And I'd also say gases on our 3rd should be earlier, but that's something where if you're going the faster factory and the starport, you're going to find you're spending your gas a lot quicker, so it's going to be a bit more natural for you to want those gases earlier. Cool. All right, let's talk about the push. We want to push. We got Marine tank. Like I said, we could have done a little bit of a better job of sending pairs of Marines out. So what I would have done, I would have said attack move, shift attack move, deselect 2 Marines, recontrol group. Oh, let's do it on the right-hand side. Attack move, shift attack move, shift attack move, deselect 2 Marines, recontrol group. Okay, now let's go for our push because we sent some Marines out to get some map control. I just think that would have been nice. Okay, let's go forward. All right, so we're on your vision. Let's take a look at how we do this. All right, so you don't even know where he's taking his 3rd. So you think it's on this side. You're like, okay, let's stim a Marine. Should be stimming 2 or 3 Marines in that scenario. Okay, we dropped a scan. Oh, his base isn't there. Okay, let's go for the other base. So one thing that worries me is you haven't found his army yet. Now we find his army. So the thing is, when we're pushing like that, it's really nice if you could just scan where you think the army is, which is usually somewhere in the middle area. Or stim Marines straight towards the army. So rather than stimming 1 Marine there, I would have loved if you stimmed a Marine there, and there. The natural and both potential 3rd bases. Because we want to see where his army is and go, oh, I got way more shit than him. Let's just kill him. Or, you know what? His army is actually really big. He has way more Marines than me. That's not the case here. But just imagine, he's got way more Marines. I got to be really careful. If he stims on me when I'm not sieged, I'm just going to lose my army. And I'm going to be way behind in this game. So it's really nice if you can check for those things. All right, so we come forward and we see, hey, there's only like 2 tanks here, but his Marines, his Vikings are there. Okay, he's got some like tanks, you know, that he can kind of move around. So you're like, I don't know if I can do it. So at this point, what I see is you saying, okay, I've scanned. I don't really think I can break in here. I'm just going to keep threatening around looking for angles. But I'm guessing you didn't really make that decision, did you? You were kind of like, I don't know, let's just see, right? You're probably like very up in the air about what you were doing with this push. You're like, maybe I can find a way in.
Yeah.
Cool.
I was kind of expecting with the push to find a 4th to pressure, then I didn't, so it kind of threw me off, and then I didn't really know what to do.
Yeah, and you haven't been focusing on Viking production, so if you're playing, and you always want to check their air units at some point, if you see them just building medevacs, you could have stopped at 6 Vikings, right? This guy's...
That's something I ask.
Yep.
So I watched some Clem like stream, which was magnificent. And one of the things that he does that he puts his eBays on the same hotkey as his command centers. And I started doing that, and ever since I started doing that, like my upgrades are miles better. So
Awesome.
another
Good
thing,
stuff.
he puts all of his production on 4. So
Cool.
I usually separate into 2, like Rex on 4 and then Gas like Factory Starport on 5. And I don't know if I should kind of put it all on 4 and do the tab.
I think it makes literally no difference. There are pros who do barracks on 1, then factory, then starport. There's pros that do split into 2 groups like you and I do, and then there's pros that do what Clem does where it's all on 1. It literally makes no difference. What would it change? Because if you
I
just
think it's more checking.
yeah.
It's like how fast I can produce. Like I just wonder if it will make me check more that I'm actually building.
So sorry, how would you check? So you just like what you mean just by looking at the bottom to see if there's like a dot to see if it's in production or okay, so I guess you're building that habit by having the command centers and the engineering bays on the same key. You're like, oh, there's nothing there. So that's an interesting way of checking it. Yeah, you could do it that way, I guess. I don't find in the situations where I'm not good with my production, I don't really have enough mental activity to be checking that because I'm kind of doing it while I'm microing, right? I'm just build Marines, build some tanks, build some medevacs or Vikings, whatever production mode I'm in. I'm just pressing those keys without even thinking about it, right? But you could train yourself to do it with a very little amount of mental attention. I don't think it's really the most important thing though, because like how often do you need to be checking if you're building units? I guess is what I'm getting at. There are times where I guess you could accidentally end up with no Marines built, but like 5 tanks queued up or something like that because you're never looking at it. But what's the actual issue you want to fix? Is it just you forgetting to produce a lot of the time, or
Yeah, like if you look now, my racks are not building because I don't really queue up that much. Like at least not enough, I feel. Like one thing I'm trying to work on is like before I engage to like queue up, and I can never do it. Like you said, my mental like it's difficult to think that way.
I think your problem is you're just building Marines at the same rate you are from the early game. Because in the early game you're fine. You're building 2 Marines, then 3 Marines, then 4 Marines at a time. It's just when you get to like 5 barracks and you're on 60, 70 workers, you just need to remember to be like, oh yeah, hold the key down. Queue like 30 Marines, dude. Like if you got 800 minerals, queue it down. That's 16 Marines. That sounds like a lot. That's nothing. 800 minerals or 1,000 minerals worth, 16 or 20 Marines. When you've got 5 barracks, that's not like you. That's 2 rounds of Marines. Do you know how long that takes? 36 seconds. So
Yeah.
you could queue 1,000 minerals worth of Marines, and that's something you just need to get more in the habit of doing. And I had to program myself to do the same thing because I'd be like Marine, 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 tank, tank, medevac, medevac, and it's like wait a second. How dare you build 4 Marines for 2 tanks and 2 medevacs? No way, buddy. We could have built like 20 Marines for every tank or medevac or whatever, you know? So it's just a matter of remembering to hold those keys down as you get a bit deeper into the game. In this game, we were a little slow on getting like the 4th and 5th barracks up with their reactors. But yeah, like you just get more used to holding it down, queuing it up, and yeah, trying to build more Marines as you go on. Rather than it's just what is your habit with building Marines? Like just then we saw you select your barracks, you queued up 3 Marines. And that's just you had minerals to queue up more. That's just you're just not queuing up enough Marines, right? You also might have a bit of a disorganized macro cycle. Because what I noticed is you're kind of building SCVs, building Marines, then you were doing other stuff, then you were building SCVs, then Marines, then you added tanks that last cycle. But you're not always doing a full macro cycle on the production. So I'm not sure if your macro cycle is super organized there in terms of what you're building whenever you tab to your production. So if we keep watching your hotkeys, we just selected our command centers again. Okay, that's for orbitals. But then we selected our command centers for SCVs. You've got a lot of APM here. So I think we're playing too fast. Yeah, that would actually be a way of putting this. We're playing too fast. So I'm just watching what you're controlling in my bottom right of the screen. I know it's blocking, so let me turn my webcam off. And then we build Marines, but we didn't build tanks. Now we're building command centers. Now we're selecting our command centers because we want to keep scanning, I think, but we're out of scans. Now we keep staring at our army. I could tell you're very frantic, but you're just not sure what you're doing. That's it. You just need to slow down. Like, for the last 2 minutes, you've known you had way less Vikings than him, but you keep picking Viking fights. So what you're doing here is you're clicking 1,000 things a minute, and you're not actually thinking about what you're doing. Slow way down with these pushes. Stop trying to like manage it so hard. If you have the Viking advantage, you go take the Viking fight. If you don't, your Vikings should be way behind your army. Add your tanks to siege, and maybe you drop a scan every now and then. But otherwise, what are you doing? Well, you're a tank Viking player. Where the hell is your second starport? Oh, we forgot to start the reactor. Let's get that going. Let's get our air upgrades. Just slow down. These pushes, you're constantly poking in over these few minutes for no reason, right? It just doesn't make any sense because all we're doing is bleeding units into him for no reason. So if you think about it, what is the point?
Just like in this position,
yep.
I know that I'm the aggressor, but I feel like my army is right next to his. If he dives in, I have to watch it, and then like I get like near side and like I just stare at my units. I could definitely. They say that like in the 4K MMR, like the main problem is to not macro enough, and I definitely am at fault for that, for sure.
I disagree. So I don't think it's not macroing enough. I think it's you are macroing a lot. You're just not focusing on one or the other. So neither your macro nor your micro has direction in this case. Because what are you actually doing to build your position? You're adding some command centers, which is awesome. You are adding bio upgrades. You are building Marines. But we're not playing to the strength of Marines, which is what I mentioned before. Right. We're inconsistently building Vikings, even though the way you're using your units looks like a player who really wants to have the Viking advantage. So we just need to be a bit more clear in what our goal is. We've already decided you want to be a tank Viking player, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've changed your production. That means you're automatically going to have more tanks, more Vikings, right? And if you find you're up in this position where a lot of the time they have more Vikings than you, maybe you will always just go, cool. Once I got my third down, 5 barracks, I go second factory, second starport, build them both at the same time, tech lab and reactor, get more tanks, more Vikings, and then you can make these pushes happen way better. And that's totally fine. You just need to switch gears. Whenever you're doing a push like this, where it's like, well, look, I'm trying to be annoying and put pressure on, but I don't really want to fight. Remember, I mentioned about 2 minutes ago in this replay, well, you scanned, it didn't look like you could break in. You're probably just going to like take a forward siege location just to scare him a bit, maybe move your army back and forth a bit, but chill out, right? Instead, you got in this mindset of, well, because I'm being the aggressor, like he could jump on me. When you siege up on the front, try to just be confident with it. Just siege your units and just chill with them. If they stim into your siege tanks, it's a big problem for them. So try to just be more comfortable with that. What happens, though, is most people do a push like you have here. They start it, because remember, this is the exact same army that moved across the map at 8 minutes 40. So you've got a minute and a half, 2 minutes, where as long as you're sieged up, this army's awesome. The reason why you get nervous is because you're very aware of a fundamental thing, which is you have not reinforced this army since 8 minutes 40. You've also been bleeding off units, being a bit scrappy. So wait a second. We bled off a few more units. Yes, we got a tank.
Leave, right?
Sorry?
I can't leave because like if I unsiege, then he jumps me.
You usually actually can just walk away. What most people don't realize is you absolutely can usually just walk away. Now, because he has the air advantage, it's a little awkward. But what I often do is I might just unsiege the front tanks and leave the back tanks sieged, pull those back. And if he comes forward, we've still got some tanks sieged and we can stim, we can siege, we can take the best fight we can. But otherwise, we just leave. Just unsiege everything and just leave. It's pretty rare that they're actually staring at it ready to go, because it's still very scary. And if he does, and you can scan him as you're leaving as well. You can be like, unsiege, drop a scan, and just try to run to the right. And if he stims forward, it's only going to be his Marines fighting you. Keep that in mind. So you can drop auto turrets, 8 auto turrets. You can, or 7 auto turrets. You could siege your tanks. He's not going to kill them all before they siege. So just get out of there. Or, why has our other army not arrived? Well, our production sucked during this whole time, right? So we've only got this little piddly army. But otherwise, you could be like, well, look, I know this army could get jumped, but I've already got another army on the left. and it's moved forward and it's sieging up over there. You do this eventually. You just take a really long time to do it, and you're not building your army in any one clear direction because of what we talked about before, which we will absolutely know to fix in future because we know what sort of player we're focused on, right? We're going to be a tank Viking guy. We're going to grab position. We're going to be awesome in that scenario, and that's going to make such a big difference. And just remember to hold position your Marines, by the way, on that right-hand side. You have so much production, so much money. Even if you lost that whole army in the bottom right, you know, it wouldn't actually matter. Like, it really would not have actually mattered at all. It would have been totally fine if you were hitting your production correctly. But it's just important for us to be nice and confident in what we're trying to achieve in the game, and that can make a big difference. So we come forward down here, but unfortunately we walk straight on into him, and we just take a fight that didn't really make any sense there. So at this point, because you're not confident in your late game, you're trying to force fights, right? That happens. Next time, you know, you would have had this second push going way earlier. You would have been able to, by the way, I don't know why we didn't do this, but yes, I do. It's because we were stressed out. Once you saw he had the air advantage, your Ravens were kind of useless. If we sent those Ravens in, we could have dropped a bunch of auto turrets in there. At any point during this 3 minutes where you have him pinned back, focused on the front, that extreme bottom right and extreme top left flank are wide open. If a single drop went in, a Liberator, a Viking, a Raven, any of that would have done huge damage. And that is the power of frontal pushes like this. Keeps them very occupied. Sometimes you get positions and you fuck them up, especially if you have Viking advantage. You could just be inching closer and closer forwards, right? But if at the same time you're like, oh, cool, pick up 8 Marines, queue them to go drop in the main, or maybe I had 2 Liberators building, and I grab a Liberator and I send one down that way and then one down this way. You siege up those 2 mineral lines. So often it's not about forcing our way through the front that necessarily just suddenly wins the game. What it does is it puts your opponent in a more and more stressful position where eventually you'll be sieging on a base, but maybe not straight away. And then your harassment gets in. And then maybe as those 2 Liberators go in, you unsiege, you rejoin with all your extra tanks, Vikings, and Marines. You come back here, and then you rotate. You break these rocks, and you get sieged on that base while he's busy dealing with the Liberators. Or we push in through this middle area, and he's just got 3 tanks. You just jump on him, kill those 3 tanks, siege up in the middle between his bases. That's a game-winning position. But no matter what, you're going to have such a better structure leading into this because now you know what the hell you're aiming for. You're playing a mega macro style. You're playing mega tank Viking control. It's all about you winning the frontal fights. It's all about you always having the Viking advantage. You're going to smash people's faces in, man.
Yep, makes sense. Definitely makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be a life changer once you have that direction with your pushes. I guarantee you that. What I see here is you're spending your money well. You're watching your army because you're afraid of him jumping. You're like, this is all good game sense. You're playing fast. You're mechanically doing good things in terms of like how you're clicking. The only thing that's lacking is that overall plan. Like once you have an overall plan here, it's going to glue together. You got sick mechanics, dude. You got really good mechanics. Like you really do. And I think you're producing quite well. Okay, yeah, you're not consistent with your Marine production yet. You will get there, especially when you are in a more confident position. You have the exact same problem I have. Why aren't you building Marines? Because you don't know what the fuck you're doing. I'm the exact same. The more confused I am in a situation, the more I'm kind of panic looking at my army, but my army's not really doing anything. Why don't I just bring it home? All right, I don't know. Am I going Vikings? Am I going Marines? If I get crossed between half Vikings, half Marines, half tanks, I'm like, wait, am I trying to be the mobile guy who runs in and grabs position? Or am I trying to be the slow tank Viking control guy? If you get crossed between those 2 different approaches, they compete against each other. And our brain starts to go, shit, like, how do I even take these fights? Like, am I attacking? Am I defending? Ugh. And that's when you forget your 3-3 all game, or you forget your second stop, or you just stop building Marines. Each cycle, you build like 2 Marines when you're meant to build 20 Marines. That's totally natural. So don't be looking at the little symptoms of like, but this thing screwed up. But that thing screwed up. Most of that will fix itself if you can really focus on that overall plan, because you've got enough fundamental understanding. Once you have a big goal in mind, you're going to start to stick all these pieces together.
Okay. Last question. You split your army because you want to hit 2 points at once, or kind of contain him from both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess your opponent has the advantage of he can take his entire army and push on one of your siege positions, or like only half of your army.
Yep.
So how do you when do you how do you finish the game? Like,
so
what is your goal?
I would actually argue with this style, you don't need to do it that way. So with this particular style, you could just do a single frontal push with like a little bit of harassment. Like I said, like a Liberator or something goes in here. Because you're so focused on tank Viking, it's more of a frontal. But if you're more Marine focused, you want to do more of that multi-prong. Why? Because you can't push through the front. So in this game, because you didn't have the air advantage, the way you would want to use aggression is attacking multiple areas with Marine. So that's more of a Marine advantage thing. You can do it when you have tank Viking advantage as well to kind of gain position, but usually you can just push through the middle. Tanks, Vikings, adding libs on whenever you like, especially if you win a Viking fight, you got like 8 Vikings left. They've got none now. You don't need to keep building Vikings at that point until you see that they're rebuilding Vikings. You could add libs, so you can push through the middle a lot more with this style. It's a slow, just push through and get in range of bases and that sort of stuff. But if you squeeze a few Marines running into a mineral line, if you squeeze in a Liberator sieging up on a base, that will definitely speed up your ability to just fuck their economy. But the idea here is you're pushing through, you're choking them out, you're denying bases, you're sieging in range of bases, and you're often putting them in a position where they're forced to try and break your siege up. Especially once you get in range of a command center, they usually have to try to break that. And often TvT wins when the other guy attacks into your forward army and you fuck it up. And if you maintain that position, you clear their army. Same thing when you're fighting against lurkers. You're setting up forward defensive positions and you're saying, fight into me, dickhead. And if you win one of those fights on their side of the map, usually that's a game-winning position from there.
Yeah, my TvT got a lot better, but I still, like, late game lurkers is still a bitch. We'll have to do another session on that at some point.
Play it like it's TvT. More tanks, more air units, and positional pushes. I really like the split pushes actually against lurkers as well, but it's its own thing, for sure. For now though, focus on that tank Viking line. Get that second factory, second starport. When you do your push, fuck them up with air control. If you can squeeze a bit of Liberator harass in, that'll be fantastic. But I think already, like we saw your macro is powerful. That's going to be cool. And just make sure you focus on one opening. Whether that's the expand or the other one, doesn't matter. Just focus on one opening for now. See what works. But either way, it's going to branch into the exact same follow-up style. So if you change your opening because whatever you're doing doesn't feel as good, it's still going to plug into the exact same mid-game style. So it should be cool.
Yeah, right. As long as you don't die in the early game, I guess.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, there's no mid game if we're dead in the early game. All right, man. Well, yeah, play some games, get into it, and try to focus in on those details. And good luck, have fun pushing with the tank Viking. Hero Marine power, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
All right, good night, brother.